When I hit the button and the garage door rolled up, I was already picturing what I should have seen. The '67 Impala's body shell sitting crooked on stands in the left bay, the bare frame on jack stands on the right, fenders, doors, wiring harnesses laid out like a crime scene I actually understood. Instead, there was nothing. Just concrete, clean concrete. My girlfriend's sedan sat in the middle of the 2.5-car garage like it owned the place, headlights catching me in the dark like I was the intruder. For a second, I honestly thought I was at the wrong house. I stepped inside slowly, like the car might be hiding behind something. No body, no chassis, no engine on the stand. The shelves where I'd stacked labeled boxes of trim and interior pieces were stripped bare. Even the greasy handprints on the wall where I'd leaned over the frame were gone, painted over or scrubbed clean. It didn't make sense. You don't just misplace 2 tons of Detroit steel. My brain started doing math before I could stop it. The $800 I spent on the disc brake conversion, the $1,200 transmission rebuild, the original purchase price, the new floor pans, the wiring kit, the upholstery deposit, receipts I'd carefully filed for years, a stack thick enough to fan out across my kitchen table, adding up to more than 11 grand and 3 years of nights and weekends. Gone, all of it gone, and replaced with one silver compact and enough empty space to make my stomach drop. Behind me from the mudroom she called out, all cheerful, asking if I'd seen how much room there was now. Her voice sounded wrong in my ears, too bright, like it belonged in a different scene, a different life. I didn't answer. My hand was already on my phone, opening the security camera app. Grainy footage filled the screen, her at the side door, holding it open while 2 guys I'd never seen before rolled my bare chassis out into the daylight. Another clip of my car's body shell swinging precariously from a wrecker. Her, standing there with her arms folded, watching. Then a different image, the Impala's title on my desk, my name printed clear and black across the bottom, legal ownership. Proof that what I was seeing on my phone wasn't some misunderstanding. It was theft, and she had orchestrated it. Later there would be a detective showing me the word felony in bold on a computer screen. Junkyard workers in high-vis vests sitting on the curb with cuffs on. Her mother on the phone, screaming that I was destroying her daughter's life over an old piece of junk. Thousands of strangers on Reddit arguing in comments about whether I was a monster or a martyr. But in that first minute, standing in the doorway of my own garage, it was just me, an empty echo where my car had been, and this cold, surgical kind of rage settling into my chest. I knew 2 things immediately. Our relationship was over, and this wasn't staying a relationship problem. This was going to be a police report, a case number, a courtroom, whether she liked it or not. Because when someone you love decides on their own that the thing you've poured your money, time, and identity into is just clutter to be hauled off for scrap, are you supposed to forgive them and move on? Or are you justified in letting the law ruin their future the way they just tried to ruin yours? I came home to an empty garage and a full-blown nightmare. To understand how it got that far, you have to see everything that led up to that moment. Before I ever saw that empty garage, the Impala was the center of my universe. I bought it in February of 2019, after months of refreshing classifieds and marketplace listings until the year 1967 started showing up in my dreams. It was a 4-door, not the Holy Grail 2-door, but it was straight, mostly complete, and most important within my budget. Faded gold paint, oxidized chrome, and the kind of smell that only comes from 50 years of sun-baked vinyl and old fuel. When the seller fired it up, the idle was rough, but I heard potential under the misfires. On the test drive, the bench seat springs poked through the padding. The steering had half a turn of play in it. Every bump made a new rattle, but I was already seeing past all of that. Fresh black paint, a rebuilt small block disc brakes, a clean interior. My car, my project. Handing over the cash felt less like a purchase and more like signing a contract with my future. I drove it home with grease-black hands and a stupid grin, listening to the tired engine howl on the highway and promising out loud, over the wind noise, that I'd bring it back to life. The next few years were a blur of small victories and receipts. Every paycheck something. A new wiring harness here, a better carb there, a set of floor pans stacked against the wall of my rented place because I didn't have the room to install them yet. The Impala slowly went from old beater to active project. Nights smelled like penetrating oil and old gas. The sound of a ratchet clicking became background noise in my life. When I finally closed on my first house, a couple of months before everything blew up, I chose it for one reason: the 2.5-car garage. Sure, the 2 acres and the barn were nice, but when the realtor rolled that garage door open and I saw the depth, the height, the power outlets along the walls, I was already mentally parking the Impala in there. It wasn't just a place to keep it out of the rain. It was a workshop, a sanctuary. Moving day for the car felt more important than moving my own furniture. I pulled the Impala into its new home and just stood there for a minute, looking at it under the fluorescent lights. I told myself, this is where it happens. This is where you really build it. Within weeks, the teardown started. The body came off the frame and went onto stands in the left bay. The bare chassis rolled over into the right bay, perched on jack stands, ready for sandblasting and paint. The engine sat on a stand like a heart waiting for surgery. Fenders, doors, hood, trunk lid, all lined up along the walls. I filled shelves and plastic bins with labeled parts: front suspension hardware, dash trim, interior screws. I took hundreds of photos from every angle, so I'd know exactly how it all went back together. You couldn't walk into that garage without knowing something serious was happening in there. It wasn't junk scattered around. It was an exploded diagram of a car, three-dimensional and mid-sentence. I'd step through the door after work, smell the mix of oil, dust, and old metal, and feel the rest of my day fall away. Financially, it was the same story. Every part had a receipt. Every service had an invoice. I kept them in a folder that grew thicker and heavier, a paper trail of my commitment. When people joked, "How much have you dumped into that thing?" I'd shrug because I honestly didn't want to total it up. I knew it was a lot. I also knew I wasn't done. So when you hear, "She just scrapped an old junk car," understand what was really sitting in that garage. Years of my time, over 11 grand in parts and labor, and a big chunk of who I thought I was. And that was the state of things. The Impala in pieces, my house finally feeling like mine, when she moved in and took one look at my dream project and saw nothing but something in her way. She moved in when things were already tense in the outside world. Work was shaky for a lot of people, rent was going up everywhere, and my place, with the extra space and the barn, suddenly made a lot of sense. We told ourselves it was practical. Just until things calmed down, she said, hauling boxes past the Impala's shell without really looking at it. She saw the house. She saw the spare bedroom. When she finally really looked into the garage, what she saw was a problem. "Wow," she said that first afternoon, standing in the doorway, arms folded. "You weren't kidding." The Impala's body sat up on stands in the left bay, the frame in the right, the whole room laid out like an exploded parts diagram. To me, it was organized chaos. Labeled bins, bolts in baggies, parts grouped on shelves by system. To her, it was just stuff, occupying the exact footprint she thought of as hers. "So where am I supposed to park?" she asked, like it was a joke, but there was an edge under it. I pointed through the open side door to the gravel drive that curved around the house. "You can park under the trees next to the barn," I said. "There's plenty of shade. The barn's open if you want to put it under a roof." She frowned. "You have a whole garage and you're parking your car outside too." "Yeah," I said, "because this is mid-project. It's not like I can just push it into a corner. The body and chassis are separated. It's not going to roll anywhere." That became the pattern. Every evening she'd pull in after work and park under the trees, headlights sweeping across the closed garage door. Sometimes I'd be inside under the car and hear her door slam a little harder than necessary. When she came in, she'd shake rain off her jacket or complain about scraping frost off her windshield, always with some sideways comment. "Must be nice having a whole garage you don't use for your actual car," she'd say, dropping her bag. "I am using it," I answer. "You're just not the one using it." She started calling the Impala that pile or the heap. "How long is that thing going to live in there?" she asked one night, when we were eating and I'd left the photo album of the teardown on the table. "As long as it takes," I said. "This isn't a weekend project. I've got over 11 grand into it already. I'm not shoving it outside to rust so your Civic can be cozy." She rolled her eyes. "You care more about that car than making this an actual home." "That car is part of my home," I said, maybe a little sharper than I meant to. "And this is my house. You knew about the Impala before you moved in." The fights were never screaming matches, but they were constant, like a low-grade fever. Her annoyance showed up in small ways. Accidentally bumping into boxes I'd staged near the back door, sighing every time she saw me grab my work light and head to the garage. My bluntness didn't help. Once, after another round about parking, I just said, "Look, this project was here before you. I can't just throw it back together so you can have a spot. It's not how this works." She went quiet at that, lips pressed thin. "It just feels like there's no space in this house that isn't about you," she said. "The garage could be ours, but it's that." I could see her point in a detached way, but every time I tried to picture compromise, it looked like me undoing years of work for the sake of something that already had other perfectly good parking options. 2 acres, trees, a whole barn. It wasn't like I was telling her to leave her car on the street. So the issue never really got resolved. It just got set aside, buried under other conversations about bills and groceries and bad news on TV. But it never went away. Every glance at the closed garage door, every remark about the weather and her car just added another layer. The week of my business trip, she brought it up again while I was packing. "How long are you going to be gone?" she asked. "Couple days," I said. "In Monday back Wednesday night." She stood in the hallway, looking past me toward the back of the house, where the door to the garage was. "Must be nice, just leaving all your stuff safe and sound," she said. "Not worrying about anything." I shrugged. "That's the point of a locked garage," I said. "Nothing's going anywhere." She made a small sound, half laugh, half scoff. "Yeah, nothing ever changes in there." I kissed her goodbye in the driveway the next morning, dropped my bag in the car, and glanced at the closed garage door one last time. My Impala was in there, in pieces but secure, under lock and key and the watchful eye of my security cameras. As I drove away, I honestly believed the worst thing I'd come home to was the same old argument about parking. It never even crossed my mind that, when I rolled that door up again, the car itself might be gone. The trip itself was nothing. 2 nights in a cheap hotel, a small-town client I'd visited before, bad coffee, worse conference room chairs. I remember being annoyed about spotty Wi-Fi and a noisy ice machine in the hallway. That was the level of problem on my radar while my real life was being rearranged back home. I didn't know it then, but while I was figuring out where to grab dinner, she was staring at our closed garage door like it was mocking her. All the little comments she'd made, all the times she'd come in wet from the rain or frozen from scraping ice off her windshield, they didn't just vanish because I wasn't there. They fermented. Looking back, I can almost reconstruct the sequence from what I found on her phone bill and what I saw on the cameras. A call to her mom, a longer call to a friend, a search for junk car removal and scrap yard free pickup in our area. I imagined the conversations were easy for her. "It's just an old car, it doesn't even run, he's never going to finish it, I need my garage." And on the other end, people who only heard rusty old car in the way, and not documented restoration with a title and receipts. Somewhere in there, she crossed a line in her head. It stopped being my project and became clutter she could solve. The security footage filled in the rest for me later. Midday, clear sky. I'm 3 hours away in a meeting while a flatbed truck noses up our driveway. The front camera catches the logo of a local scrapyard on the door. She comes out of the house with her hair up, keyring in hand, moving like someone finally getting something checked off a list. On the side camera, she unlocks the man door to the garage and waves two guys inside. They're in work boots and safety vests, looking around like they've struck gold. One of them actually whistles when he sees the Impala's frame and the spread of parts. They don't ask whose it is. On the video, you can see her talking, gesturing around the garage. She points at the body shell, the chassis, the engine on the stand, the boxes along the wall. Then she shrugs, palms up like, take it. The work is ugly and methodical. They back the flatbed up, raise the bed, and with a wrecker-style boom, they drag the bare chassis out first, winching it up at a crooked angle until the front wheels lift off the jack stands and slam back down. The frame scrapes, throwing sparks. Nobody flinches. Next, the body shell. On camera, it looks like they're moving a dead whale. They run a strap through the windows, cinch it tight, and yank it off the stands. It swings, banging into the garage door frame hard enough to chip paint. She stands a safe distance away, arms folded, watching the whole time. Trip after trip, they strip my garage. Engine, transmission, axles, boxes of parts I'd labeled and stacked to stay organized, suspension pieces, interior trim, small hardware I'd bagged so I'd never lose a bolt. They carry them out like they're cleaning up after a yard sale that never happened. At one point, one of the guys pauses by the workbench and lifts a folder, my thick stack of receipts. On the side camera, I see him flip it open, glance at an invoice, and then set it back down. He doesn't take it. Why would he? Paper doesn't pay by the pound. The last clip from the interior camera shows her standing alone in the garage when they're done. Both bays are empty, stained outlines on the floor where the jack stands used to be, bare spots on the shelves where boxes once sat. The Impala has been erased so completely it looks like it was never there at all. She looks around for a long moment, then reaches over and hits the garage door opener. The door rumbles down. Sunlight narrows to a slit, then vanishes. While I was gone for just a couple of days, the heart of my home was stripped without my consent. I was still driving back, thinking about nothing more serious than traffic, completely unaware that I was heading toward a house where my car was gone and my girlfriend was smiling like she'd finally fixed our problem. The drive home felt normal. I was tired, a little stiff from too much time in a car and conference room chairs, but my head was in a good place. I'd been mentally walking through my next steps on the Impala, finish stripping the front suspension, get the frame ready for the guy who was going to blast it, maybe call about that used rear end I'd seen listed. The kind of planning that made the hours on the highway go faster. When I turned into my driveway, the first thing that pinged my brain was nothing dramatic, just absence. Her car wasn't in its usual spot under the trees by the barn. The gravel looked weirdly open, like a tooth was missing from a smile. I figured she'd parked closer to the house because of rain or groceries. The house itself seemed bright. Lights on, curtains open. When I stepped inside, she was right there, almost too fast, like she'd been listening for my car. "Hey," she said, smiling wide, too wide. She came up and hugged me, took my bag out of my hand before I could set it down. "How was the trip? You hungry? I made dinner." That alone was off. She cooked sometimes, sure, but this was different. Table set, kitchen clean, something already simmering on the stove. She kept moving, picking up random clutter that didn't need picking up, asking about my drive, my meeting, my hotel, like she was trying to keep the focus pointed anywhere but here. I chalked it up to her being in a good mood. It had been a while since we'd had one of those without some edge to it. It wasn't until after I ate, when I stepped out back to look over the yard, that the nagging started. I glanced toward the barn again. No car. I thought about mowing the next day, about needing to know where not to dump grass clippings. So I went back inside. "Hey," I called. "Where'd you park? I'm probably going to mow tomorrow. I don't want to blow stuff all over your car." She was wiping down an already clean counter. She froze for half a second, then turned with that same too bright smile. "Oh, don't worry about it," she said. "I parked in the garage." My brain actually rejected the sentence. It didn't fit with reality. "What?" I said. "How?" She laughed a little and tossed the dish towel aside. "Just go look," she said. "You'll see, it looks so much better now." There was a tone in her voice I couldn't place, something between pride and anticipation. I walked down the hall toward the door to the garage, a weird tight feeling building in my chest. I opened the interior door and hit the wall switch. The fluorescence buzzed to life. For a second, the familiar shadows and outlines I expected were there in my mind. The Impala's body on stands to the left, the frame on the right, parts stacked and labeled. Then I hit the opener. The big garage door groaned and rolled up, and fresh air and late afternoon light swept in over a scene that did not make sense. Her silver car sat dead center in the bay, nose in, perfectly straight like a commercial for how normal people use garages. The concrete around it was mostly clear. The stands, the chassis, the body shell, the engine, the boxes, everything that had defined that space for the last couple of months were simply not there. For a moment my brain tried to fill in the blanks. Maybe I was just not seeing it from this angle. Maybe I left something outside. Maybe. I stepped down onto the concrete. The air smelled different. No heavy oil, no dust from old metal, just faint detergent and the rubber of her tires. I turned in a slow circle. Empty shelves, bare walls, stains on the floor where the jack stands used to sit, now just discolored patches with nothing on top of them. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear my own pulse in my ears. My mouth went dry. It felt like the room had tilted and I was trying not to slide off. "Where's my car?" I heard myself ask, but my voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere else. She was in the doorway, leaning against the frame, arms crossed, that same bright expression glued to her face. "You mean that pile of junk," she said. "I had some guys come and take it away. Now you can actually use this space. We can both park inside." In an instant, my project wasn't just missing. It had been treated as trash. And standing there in that empty garage, looking at her smiling in my doorway, I realized this wasn't just a fight about priorities anymore. This was something that might not stop at a breakup. For a second after she said it, "I had some guys come and take it away," I honestly thought she was messing with me, some sick joke. I stared at her, then back at the empty bays, waiting for the punchline. It never came. "You did what?" My voice came out low and flat, like it belonged to somebody else. She pushed off the doorframe, coming a little farther into the garage, like she wanted to show off her work. "It was junk," she said. "It was all in pieces, it's been years, and it was taking up the whole garage. I called a place, they hauled it off for free, and now we can both park in here like normal people." My chest went hot. "That junk was my car," I said. "My project, I had the title. You had no right to touch it, let alone give it away." She scoffed. "You're being dramatic, it wasn't even a functioning car. It was a mess. I did you a favor." "A favor?" I stepped closer to her, pointing at the stains on the floor where the jack stands had been. "There was over $11,000 in parts and work in here. Years of my time. You just handed it off to some scrap guys like it was trash." She rolled her eyes. "You're not getting that money back anyway. You never finish anything. It was just sitting here. I was tired of living in a construction zone so you could play mechanic." That hit like a slap. Not because it was true, but because it told me exactly how little she'd ever respected any of it. "This is theft," I said. "This isn't a household decision. You stole my property." "It's my house too," she shot back. "I live here. The garage is part of our home, not your shrine. I'm not going to apologize for wanting to actually use it." "It's not your house," I said, and that was the moment something in me snapped into place. "It's mine. The deed has my name on it, the car was mine, and you just gave it away without asking." She went quiet then, eyes flicking, like she was finally starting to realize how far she'd gone. "You're not really going to, like, sue me or something," she said, voice suddenly small. "Come on, over a car." I took a breath, steadying myself. "We're done," I said. "Pack your stuff. I want you out of here. And yes, I will be taking you to court. Civil, criminal, whatever I can. You don't get to erase my life's work and walk away." She stared at me, waiting for me to back down. When I didn't, her face crumpled, then hardened again. "You're insane," she said. "Nobody's going to side with you over some rusty old car." She stormed back into the house, already dialing. I heard her in the bedroom, crying into the phone, telling her mom I was kicking her out over a hunk of metal and threatening to ruin her life. I went to my office and pulled out the folder. Receipts spilled across the desk, purchase price, parts orders, machine shop bills. I started adding them up for the first time, line after line, until the total made me feel sick. Over 11,000, not counting the hours I'd spent under that car. Then I pulled up the security cameras, watched her open the door, watched strangers roll my frame out into the sunlight, watched my car's body swing from their wrecker while she stood there, arms folded, supervising. My phone started lighting up before I finished the first clip. Her mother, her sister, a couple of her friends. "She can't pay you back, just let it go." "It was an old junker, dude. Why are you being like this? You're really going to destroy her future over a car." To them, it was just an old Impala. To me, it was proof that someone I trusted thought they had the right to decide my property, my time, my identity, were disposable. That night, surrounded by receipts and the frozen image of my car being dragged away, I made up my mind. No matter how many people told me to drop it, I wasn't going to. This wasn't just a bad breakup anymore. It was the beginning of a fight I intended to take all the way into a courtroom. Once she was gone and the house finally went quiet, the anger stopped being this wild, directionless thing and started hardening into something sharper. I had the folder of receipts on my desk, the security footage pulled up on my monitor, and this question beating in my head. Am I really going to take this all the way? I started by posting about it online. I laid out the timeline, the car, the money, the video. Strangers, car guys, legal nerds, people who'd been through ugly breakups came out of the woodwork. "This is theft. Get a lawyer. Do not let this go." It was the first time I felt like I wasn't crazy for treating it as more than relationship drama. I made an appointment with a local attorney. Sitting in that small office, the air smelling like old carpet and coffee, I spread everything out on his desk. Title in my name. Printed screenshots of the Impala in the garage, then gone. Receipts totaling over 11 grand. Still images of her letting the scrap guys in. He flipped through the stack, occasionally pausing to tap a number on his calculator. "You documented all of this?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I keep records." He nodded. "Good. What she did is, at minimum, a clear civil issue. You can absolutely sue for the value of the car and parts. But given the dollar amount and the fact that she authorized a third party to remove and presumably sell or scrap your vehicle without your consent, that's also criminal. Grand larceny. Possibly grand theft auto." Hearing those words from someone who did this for a living made my stomach knot. This wasn't just me being pissed. It had a name. "Do you want to pursue both?" he asked. I thought of that empty garage, of her saying she'd done me a favor. "Yeah," I said, "I do." He told me to keep everything organized, to back up the footage in multiple places, to write down every detail I could remember while it was still fresh. "And file a police report," he said. "As soon as possible. Take all of this with you." That night, as I was photocopying receipts, my phone rang again. Her mom. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I picked up. "What is wrong with you?" she started, no hello. She told me you're threatening to have her arrested over a stupid old car. Do you have any idea what that would do to her life? I let her rant for a minute about how her daughter was going through so much, how it was just junk, how you're a grown man, act like one and drop this. When she finally paused for breath, I answered. She made the decision to take something that didn't belong to her, I said. I didn't ruin anything. She did that herself. She thought she was helping you, her mom snapped. No, I said. She thought she could do whatever she wanted with my property and I'd just roll over. I'm not doing that. I hung up shaking, not from doubt but from the weight of realizing how far this could go. The first time I drove to the police station, it was late evening. I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, staring at the lit-up sign, feeling like I was about to cross a line I couldn't uncross. Inside, a tired officer at the desk told me they were short-staffed, that anything this involved would need to be handled during the day. Come back in the morning with all your paperwork, he said. We'll take a full report. So I did. The next morning I walked in with my folder, my USB drive with the camera footage and the title. I laid it all out for the detective on duty. He listened, asked clarifying questions, then started going through the evidence piece by piece. With each receipt he added up, his eyebrows went higher. When he watched the segment of video where she opened the garage and waved the guys in, he shook his head. You said you didn't give anyone permission to remove the vehicle, he asked. None, I said. Verbal, written, nothing, that car in my name. He looked at the title, checked the VIN against the numbers I'd written down. Then he turned back to his computer and started typing. We're going to classify this as grand larceny and grand theft auto, he said. We'll open an investigation. We'll be contacting her, and we'll reach out to the scrapyards in the area to see if we can locate the car. He slid a copy of the report across the desk for me to sign. My hand shook just enough for me to notice as I put my name on it. When I walked back out into the daylight, report in hand, it hit me. What started as a fight over a parking spot was now officially logged as a felony theft case. I'd pushed it as far as I could on my own. From here on out, the next moves belonged to the police, and to my ex whenever they finally got hold of her. After I filed the report, there was this strange silence. I walked out of the station with paperwork in my hand and a case number, but nothing in my garage had changed. The bays were still empty. The stains on the concrete were still there. Her tire tracks were still the only ones in the dust. The detective had said they'd be in touch, that they'd reach out to her and start calling scrapyards. I went home and did what people do when they're waiting for something they can't control. I watched my phone like it was a heart monitor. Every buzz made my pulse jump. Days stretched. Work became background noise. I logged in, did what I had to do, then found myself staring out the window at the barn, thinking about the Impala. I kept imagining the worst possible scenarios. My car already crushed into a cube, stacked 6 high in some anonymous pile, or stripped for parts and scattered across town, pieces of my project bolted onto strangers' beaters. Sometimes the guilt crept in. I'd hear my ex's mom in my head. You're going to ruin her life over a stupid car. I'd picture my ex seeing an unknown number pop up on her phone, answering it, and hearing, "This is Detective so-and-so" on the other end. I wondered what her face would look like in that moment, realizing this wasn't just an argument she could cry her way out of. But every time I started to second-guess myself, I'd pull up the footage again. I'd watch her open the garage, wave in 2 strangers and stand there, arms crossed, while they yanked my car into the daylight. That switched the doubt off pretty fast. She made a deliberate choice. I was just refusing to pretend it was nothing. The detective called once to confirm a few details. He asked again about the date of purchase, any distinguishing marks on the car, whether I had photos of the teardown. I told him I had a full album, timestamps and all. That'll help, he said. We've started contacting local scrapyards. If they took it in, there should be some record, technically. Technically, I repeated, hearing the weight under that word. Some of these places are loose with their paperwork, he said, but the value here puts it in a different category. We're treating this seriously. After that, it went quiet again. I checked my email, my voicemail, even my spam folder. Nothing. My ex never called. Her friends sent a few more angry texts and then went silent too, like they'd all decided I was beyond saving. At night, lying in bed, I'd picture cops walking up and down rows of dead cars, peeling back layers of rust and dust, reading VINs under fluorescent lights. I wondered if anyone at the junkyard had hesitated when they saw a '67 Impala come in on a flatbed in pieces. I wondered if they'd shrugged and weighed it like scrap anyway. A week after I filed, my phone finally rang with the detective's number. My stomach dropped. "Hey, this is Detective Ramirez," he said. His tone was different this time, more alert, almost energized. "We went out to a local junkyard today to follow up on your report. We found something you're going to want to hear about." When Ramirez said, "We found something you're going to want to hear about," I actually had to sit down. "Is it the Impala?" I asked. My voice came out thin. "We're pretty sure it is," he said. "We went out to a local scrapyard this morning. Your description matched a car they took in recently, so we paid them a visit." I could hear noise in the background on his end, voices, maybe a radio. He kept talking. "It's a big operation," he said. "Rows of crushed cars, stacks 5 high, forklifts moving stuff around. When we got there, everything looked normal until one of my guys noticed a car up on a forklift, being moved toward a back corner behind some taller piles, almost like they were trying to tuck it out of sight." My grip on the phone tightened. I pictured it too easily. "We told them to set it down where we could see it," he said. "Body off the frame, no front clip, no interior to speak of. A bare chassis and a shell. '67 Impala, 4-door. My chest did this weird lurch. That was my car. Even stripped, there was no mistaking it. "Guy running the forklift says, 'That's ours, came in last week, we got the title,'" Ramirez went on. "So we asked to see the paperwork. Suddenly nobody can find it. It's in the office, then in the safe, then the boss has it somewhere. Meanwhile, my officer is crawling around the frame with a flashlight, reading the VIN." He paused just long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. "The chassis VIN matched the number on your title," he said. "We checked the body too. It lines up, it's your car." For the first time since I'd opened that garage door and seen nothing, I felt something like air in my lungs again. My eyes actually stung. "So it's not crushed?" I asked. "Not parted out?" "Not yet," he said. "It was on its way to being buried in the back. They'd stuck it on a forklift and were about to put it behind other stacks, which is interesting, considering the lack of paperwork and the value. We took statements, and at least one of the employees is in custody now, pending charges related to possession of stolen property." The idea that somebody at that yard had looked at my car, seen a chance to quietly make it vanish, and gone for it, lit the anger back up under the relief. "What happens now?" I asked. "Right now, the vehicle is being impounded as evidence," he said. "We've tagged the chassis and the body. When this moves forward, you're going to want to bring that photo album you mentioned, pictures of the teardown, parts layout, anything that helps us match any loose components they've still got to your car." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I'd taken those pictures because I was being methodical, thinking ahead to reassembly. Now they were going to be proof in a criminal investigation. "And her?" I asked. "Have you talked to her yet?" "We've attempted contact," he said. "Left messages at the number you gave us, went by the last address she had on file. No luck so far, but we're not done trying." I hung up a few minutes later, my head spinning. Against every fear I'd had, the Impala was still out there, battered, stripped, almost buried, but real. Recoverable. At the same time, it wasn't mine to touch. It sat in some fenced lot now, tagged and logged, waiting for lawyers and judges. The junkyard was under a microscope. My ex was one returned call away from finding out just how far this had gone, and I was stuck in the middle, relieved my car had survived, and staring down the reality that getting it back meant seeing this not just through a police report, but through whatever came next: lawyers, court dates, and a whole lot of people online ready to tell me whether I was a monster or justified for pushing it this far. When I finally sat down to write everything out for Reddit, it felt like dumping my brain onto the page. The Impala, the receipts, the video, the breakup, the police report, the junkyard, every ugly piece of it. I hit post expecting a handful of replies, maybe a few people telling me I was crazy or that I needed therapy. Instead, my phone started lighting up like a slot machine. Comment after comment rolled in. It didn't take long before I realized there were patterns. Whole groups of people who saw the situation the exact same way, even though they didn't know me at all. The first crowd I noticed were the "it's not just a car" people. They latched on to the part where I said I'd been working on the Impala for over a year and a half and had more than 11 grand into it. One person wrote something like, "This isn't about metal, this is about time and respect. She took a project you poured your soul into and decided it was clutter." Another said, "Calling it junk is just her trying to minimize how badly she screwed up. This is the same as burning someone's artwork or throwing out their instruments." They kept repeating the same core idea. It wasn't the dollar amount alone, it was what the car represented. My nights in the garage, the planning, the parts I hunted down. Destroying that without asking crossed a line you can't come back from. To them, breaking up and going legal wasn't overkill, it was the bare minimum. Then there were the law hawks, the "this is grand theft" camp. They weren't talking about feelings at all, they were talking statutes and definitions. A couple of them claimed to be lawyers or cops. Whether that was true or not, they were very specific. "Dude, this is textbook grand larceny," one of them said. "Titled property, removed without owner's consent, transferred to a third party. That's not a lover's quarrel, that's a felony." Another pointed out how rare it was to have such clean evidence: paper trail, title, security footage. If you back down now, you're teaching her there are no consequences for this kind of thing. They fixated on her attitude too, the way she'd laughed and called me dramatic, the way her mom said it was just a stupid car. To them, that was entitlement, plain and simple. The car people hit me hardest though. Guys and girls who knew exactly what a frame-off on a '67 Impala meant. They weren't impressed that it wasn't running. They understood that pulling it apart was the work. "I've spent 3 years on my project," one said. "If someone touched a single bolt without asking, I'd lose my mind. Stripped in a garage means it's loved, not abandoned." Another commented, "Finding a solid 4-door 67 these days is no joke. You don't just get another one." She didn't just trash a car, she trashed a unicorn. A lot of them said the same thing in different words. After something like that, they could never trust that person again. Not around their tools, not around their hobbies, not around anything that mattered. Then there were the boundary people, the set a precedent camp. They zoomed out from my specific mess and looked at the bigger picture. "If you drop this," someone wrote, "you're telling her and everyone watching that destroying property is a valid way to win an argument." Another said, "Roommates, partners, whoever, people need to know that 'I didn't like it' is not a magic key that lets you give away other folks' stuff." They kept coming back to the evidence. Photos, VIN, receipts, video. "This isn't he said she said," one commenter pointed out. "You actually have the tools to hold her accountable. Most people don't when this happens to them." Thread after thread, the same message echoed back at me. To a huge part of the internet, this wasn't about romance at all anymore. It was about whether someone could erase years of your work because they didn't like looking at it, and whether walking away would mean your boundaries were just suggestions. Still, buried between all the press charges and "take her to court" were a few hesitations. People wondering out loud if the legal hammer, once dropped, might be more than she could ever crawl out from under. That was the question I couldn't shake as I scrolled in the dark. If I kept going, was I just defending myself? Or was I about to make sure one terrible decision followed her for the rest of her life? When my post blew up, I went back and added an update about the car being found at the junkyard, about the worker getting arrested, about the Impala sitting in an impound lot as evidence. That brought in a whole new wave of opinions, and not all of them were on my side. The first ones that hit different were the let it go people. They agreed she'd done something awful, but they were staring past the Impala at what might come next. One commenter wrote, "You've got your car back. Yeah, it's a mess, but it's not crushed. Do you really want to saddle her with a felony over a moment of stupidity?" Another said, "Civil court, sure. Make her pay what she can. But once the criminal system gets involved, you don't control what happens. You might be turning a bad decision into a life sentence." They talked about background checks, jobs, apartments, about how a record sticks in ways money doesn't. Some suggested mediation, or a payment plan, or asking the DA to go light. To them, pushing this to the absolute limit sounded less like justice and more like revenge. Then there were the people who zoomed in on the relationship itself, the both of you messed up crowd. They went back to the earlier parts of the story, where she was complaining about the garage and I was telling her, "My house, my rules." "You're legally in the right," one of them said, "but relationally this was a disaster long before she touched the car. You dismissed her feelings. She escalated in the worst possible way." Someone else put it more bluntly, "She committed theft. You committed stubbornness. You both ignored the problem until it exploded." They weren't defending what she did. They were saying the path there had a lot of warning signs I'd chosen not to take seriously. Reading that stung more than the pure hate I got, because buried in it was a little piece of truth. I had decided the car was non-negotiable, and I'd stopped really listening after that. Another group started speculating about where her head had been. They pointed out that she'd moved in during a broader crisis, that she might have been overwhelmed, maybe desperate to control something. One comment stuck with me. She was wrong, period, but people in panic make tunnel vision decisions. She might have genuinely thought she was fixing a shared problem, not committing $11,000 of theft. They talked about mental health, stress, and how context should shape consequences. Not erase them, shape them. And then there were the people raging at the junkyard more than at her. "Your ex is one person making a terrible choice," someone wrote. "That yard has a whole system ready to disappear cars with missing paperwork." Others wondered how many classics and daily drivers had already gone into that hidden back stack, never matched to a title, never found. They kept reminding me that I wasn't just up against an ex who called my car junk. I was looking at a business that tried to bury evidence when cops showed up. In their eyes, the junkyard deserved every bit of heat it was getting, and more. By the time I scrolled to the bottom each night, the picture was muddy. Most people agreed on one thing: what she did was wrong. Where they split was on what I should do next. Full charges or mercy. Draw a hard line or ask the system to go easy. Meanwhile, the detective had told me they still hadn't reached her. The Impala sat behind a fence with an evidence tag on it. Her phone was probably lighting up with unknown numbers she wasn't answering. The internet had argued the whole thing from every angle, but none of those usernames had to live with the outcome. I did. And sooner or later, the police were going to ask me a question no comment section could answer for me. How hard did I really want them to come down when she finally picked up the phone? Knowing the Impala was sitting in a police impound, instead of crushed in some anonymous stack, changed everything and nothing at the same time. On paper, I'd won. The detective had matched the VINs, the junkyard guy was in cuffs, my title and my receipts were finally worth something outside my own filing cabinet. I even pulled out the photo album I'd made during the teardown, shots of the bare frame on jack stands, the body hanging from the hoist, the parts laid out in labeled bins. When Ramirez told me I'd need that to help identify what else at the yard belonged to me, It felt like my obsessive documentation had finally paid off. But every time I walked past the garage, all I saw was absence. Empty bays, oil stains with nothing parked over them. My car existed, but not here. It was evidence now, tagged and logged, waiting behind a chain-link fence until people in suits were done arguing over it. That in-between state started to feel like the rest of my life too. The relationship was over, but not really over. The police still hadn't reached her. Her mom's voice, "You're ruining her life over a stupid car," kept echoing in my head. Reddit was split between burn it all down and show mercy. The law was moving at its own slow pace. I kept thinking about what the Impala had meant to me before any of this. I'd bought it in 2019, before the world went sideways, as this long-term project I could chip away at. It was independence, my first house, my garage, my build. On bad days, being out there with a ratchet in my hand and classic rock on the radio was how I stayed sane. To her, it had just been that heap blocking her from parking inside. That's what it boiled down to, really. Not just the car, but the difference between seeing something as junk and seeing it as the thing that keeps you going. Between "it's just stuff" and "this is part of who I am." I'd drawn a hard line and said, "This matters to me." She decided her convenience mattered more. Was I supposed to absorb an $11,000 loss, swallow years of work and sentiment, and call that love? Or was love sometimes drawing a line so bright that when someone stepped over it, you let the consequences fall, even if it meant involving cops and courts? I was grateful for the people online who told me I wasn't crazy, and for the ones who forced me to look at the cost of pushing this all the way. But at the end of the day, none of them had to sign paperwork, sit in that detective's chair, or walk past that empty garage every morning. If you were in my position, car found but locked up as evidence, ex still dodging calls, a felony case quietly building in the background, what would you do? Would you keep your foot on the gas and let the system run its course, ask for a lighter sentence, or back off entirely now that the metal was mostly safe? Because that's where I was stuck. My trust stripped down like that Impala shell, my project waiting behind a fence, and my X1 answered phone call away from finding out just how far I was really willing to take this.